Hi guys, welcome back to the Art of Server. So in today's video, we're going to investigate the power consumption of the HP Z820. So I've made several videos on this machine so far, and some people have raised the concern that in 2023, which is the time of this recording, that a machine like this, which is about 10 years old from the Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge era, might consume too much power relative to today's machines. And I think the question of whether this is worth running in 2023 is really going to depend on your local electricity rates. And so I can't really say yes or no to that question, but what I can do is show you what the typical power consumption is with the configuration that I have here. And so I'm going to break it down in a couple of different ways. First, I'm going to power on the machine, and we're going to investigate the power consumption of the machine from boot up until the OS is fully booted up and sitting idle. And over here you can see that the machine is powered through this kilowatt, and so I have a camera here which will capture the kilowatt, and I'll leave that in the corner of this video so you guys can see in real time what the power consumption is like as I'm going through the various steps. And you'll notice that I have the hard drives pulled out, and that's because I wanted to give you an idea of what the power consumption is without the hard drives. And so the only thing in this machine right now is a video card and the turbo drive with an M.2 SSD. And so that's the boot drive. And so that's the minimum configuration basically. And I do have very high powered CPUs. I have the E5-2687W V2s, and those are the most powerful CPUs available for this generation of machine. So whatever power numbers we get today will basically kind of be your maximum limit. And of course, you could always reconfigure this machine with lower power consuming processors to save on energy. But at least this will kind of give you an upper limit to expect, and then we can see what happens from there. Now once we get booted up, I will start plugging in these hard drives one by one, and we'll keep an eye on that kilowatt to see how much the power consumption goes up by, and then you'll get a sense for what the hard drives themselves will consume, which is kind of a non-negotiable factor if you are planning to use the HP Z820 or any machine as a storage server, because you're going to have hard drives anyway. So that's why I wanted to kind of separate the power consumption of the hard drives, because that's kind of a fixed factor that no matter what generation machine you use is really not going to change that much so long as you are actually just using hard drives. I'm going to go ahead and set up this camera on a tripod so you can see what's on the monitor, and I'll have this camera collecting or reading off the kilowatt. All right, so let's go ahead and power on the machine, and you can see actually before I power it on, you'll see that the kilowatt right now is reading about half a watt, and so I think that's just standby power for the Z820. That's the only thing plugged in through the kilowatt right now, so that's just standby power. So now I'm going to go ahead and power on the machine. All right, so you can see it surges up to about 180, 175 watts. The screen is still blank. The monitor, by the way, is not plugged in through this kilowatt, so that's a different power source. This is, okay, we're up to about 202 watts. So what the kilowatt is showing is purely just the HP Z820. All right, we're shot up to 292 watts. Okay, so I'm seeing the HP logo on the screen now. All right, I'm at the bootloader at 190 watts. And go ahead and boot up the machine. Fedora Linux workstation is now booting up off of the SSD drive. We are consuming about 132 watts. So just as a reminder, okay, so we're now at the login screen of the machine, of the OS, sorry, and we are reading about 129, 130 watts or so. Just to reiterate, this machine is a dual processor, E5-2687W V2 Ivy Bridge. So this is the fastest workstation class Xeon processor, and there's two of them. And the machine is also fully loaded with all 16 DIMMs, and I believe there are 16 gigabyte DIMMs, so it's a total of 256 gigabytes. All right, so let's go ahead and log in. All right, so I also have a screen recorder going on right now, so if the footage from the camera doesn't work out too well, I'll switch over to that so you guys can see what's going on the screen. So I just want to confirm for you guys, first of all, that I do indeed have the E5-2687W V2 processors, and there are two of these. So you can see we have two sockets, right? And so that is a total of, so by the way, this CPU will scale up to 4 gigahertz. So that's the max turbo speed there, okay? And I believe these are 16, there's 8 cores, 2 threads per core, so that's 16 threads per CPU, so we have a total of 32 threads, okay? So this is a fairly powerful machine, or actually for its generation, an incredibly powerful machine, and still very much usable today, and especially for server duty, I think this machine is totally fine. And we're reading about 153 watts at the moment, and this is basically with the machine idle, so I can kind of show you that. There's really nothing going on other than, of course, my screen recorder is running in the background, so that might be taking up a few watts there. But other than that, nothing else is running on this machine right now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in the hard drives one by one. So actually, let me escalate to root for a second here, and because I'm going to have to import the Z-Pool. So all right, I'm going to go ahead and plug in one of the drives. And actually, let me kind of monitor that activity. Okay, we have spinning up disk. Power consumption's up to about 160. It was up to about 170. I think after it spun up. Okay, I can hear the heads moving. It spun up to about 170. Now it's settling at around 159. So let me actually open up another terminal. Let's monitor the number of drives we have here. Okay, so that's one drive. Went up to about 165 watts. I'm going to plug in another drive. All right, shot up to 182. I think that's spinning up the disk. Okay, disk is spun up, and now we are sitting at about 170 watts for 2 hard drives. All right, I'm going to plug in the third drive. Again, spun up to 183 watts, 184 watts. So there's always that little bit of surge of about 10 to 15 watts when the drives are spinning up, but once it's spun up, it settles down. So we have a total of 3 hard drives spun up right now, and we're up to about 172 watts or so. All right, not too bad. Let's go ahead and plug in the fourth drive. So we've surged up to 192 watts or so. And I can hear the drive spin up and the heads are moving. And so, all right, so the drive is now attached and we're settling at around 178 watts. 179, 178, somewhere around there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in a 5th drive. All right, so we've surged up to about 200 watts. And I think, yeah, now we're settling down to 190, 180 something. High 180s or mid 180s to 190. Okay, so the drive is now attached to SDF and we're at 186, 187 watts. Okay, so not bad. This is pretty much as expected. All right, so next drive. Sorry, having a little bit of difficulty over here trying to plug the drive in the IC dock. I don't know, it's catching on to something. Not sure what the problem is. All right, here we go. Okay, there is SDG spinning up. We're surging up to 208 watts during spin up. Okay, I can hear the drive. And it is now attached as SDG, and we are at 193, 194 watts, 195, okay, somewhere around there. All right, so that's with 6 hard drives. Okay, just plugging in the 7th drive and surging to 216 watts or so. All right, looks like it's attached, and we are settling at around 202 watts. 203-ish. Okay, so one more drive. Let's plug that in. Okay, so that's the last and 8th drive. We're surging to 225 watts. And now it is attached, and so we are settled at around 212, 213 watts. All right, so with all the drives now attached, I will go ahead and import the ZFS pool. Okay, so the data pool is now imported and accessible, and we are settling at around 215 watts. So I think earlier when all the drives were detached, I don't quite remember exactly what number it was. I think it was around 160 watts or so. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll go back to the footage later and tell you exactly. I'm just going off memory right here, but I think it was about 160 watts or so with none of the drives plugged in. And so now with all the drives fully spun up and plugged in, we're settling at around 215 watts. So the difference is about 55, let's say 55 watts or so. And that's of course with the drives kind of idle. The heads are not really moving or doing anything right now. Let's go ahead and let's say run a benchmark to load up those drives, and let's just see what happens. All right, so I am in the /data folder, which is where the ZFS pool is located, and I'll make a temp folder here, and then we'll go ahead and run iozone. I think, let's see, I'm trying to remember how to run iozone. I haven't run this in a while. I think there's just a generic test auto mode that I can use. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I don't know if this is going to really, I mean, auto mode basically runs through a whole variety of scenarios. So it may not be the best test, but it does kind of give you kind of a rough idea. So anyway, it's going to load up actually on the other screen here. Let me move this to the side. And on the other screen here, let me run iostat so that we can kind of see what's going on with all the drives. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a go. All right, so iozone is starting off with very small record sizes, so this is not going to be a lot of bandwidth. It'll be a lot of small transactions, which is, you know, obviously not the ideal scenario for hard drives, because the hard drives don't do a lot of IOPS. But so yeah, so you're seeing kind of it load up about 10 to 15. Okay, now well, it got a little bit bigger because I think it was going through the larger record sizes. So this is going to kind of go up and down a little bit, up and down a little bit. Okay. So while all the drives are being activated with this test, the power consumption is now up to about 250 watts. Okay, so, well, it kind of jumped a little bit, but it was somewhere between 240 to 250 watts. Right. Okay, so now we're seeing larger tests where we're getting a bigger I/O load. Not necessarily in terms of IOPS, but at least in terms of megabytes written per second. We're seeing about 70 per drive there. So, and power has shot up to about 260 watts. So this is under basically an I/O load across all 8 drives. We're seeing about 260 watt consumption. All right, so let me go ahead and just stop this benchmark. All right, so you can see the power immediately dropped down to 218 watts. All right, so there was about 260. So under load, basically, it's consuming about an extra 40 watts, which is actually pretty decent if you think that's the power consumption or the power surge of 8 hard drives. You know, what, 40 divided by 8 is basically 5 watts per drive. So under load, basically, the drives are consuming about 5 watts more. And maybe if you want it to be conservative, you could say, you know, at most maybe like, say, 7 watts or something like that. But, all right, so that's for I/O load on the drives. But so far, it's really not putting any kind of load on the CPU. And so let's go ahead and maybe run a CPU load. So I have the sysbench benchmark utility. So let's see. I think it's a sysbench, CPU, thread. I want to make sure I load up. Okay, so let me stop this side. I'm going to just run top. And I want to make sure I load up all the threads. So I'm going to say threads equals, yeah, okay, so let's say threads equals 32. Okay, and then time, we'll run this for, let's say 60 seconds. All right, so I think that should do it. All right, so you can see on the left side here, we're fully loading up the all the threads on the CPU. And you can see power has surged to 438 watts. So clearly, you know, I/O doesn't consume very much power, but CPU definitely does. So we are hitting about 440 watts. Okay, and keep in mind, again, this is with the E5-2687W V2 processor, which is the fastest processor available, most power consuming processor available for this generation. So if you were to configure your Z820 with a more, let's say, energy, you know, consumption oriented or low energy consumption oriented CPU, you can probably expect something less than what we're seeing today in terms of power consumption. All right, so the benchmark stopped after 60 seconds, and we're now down to, again, 224-ish watts. So back at idle, basically. And that's probably a little bit high because I'm running the screen recorder in the background here, which is right now using 100% CPU on one thread. So, so actually here, let me stop that for a second here. All right, so I've stopped the screen recorder and power is now down to 208 watts. All right, so yeah, definitely the screen recorder is contributing a little bit to this number. But right now, with the machine idle, 8 hard drives spinning with the fastest processors, fully loaded up DIMMs, and actually I can show you that over here. Well, let me turn on the screen recorder again so you guys can see what's on the screen. All right, so you can see I'm just running INXI to show you all the memory modules. And so we have 16 DIMMs total for a total of 256 gigabytes. So this is a heavily loaded machine. So keep that in mind when we're looking at these numbers. So as the number surged back up to 230 watts, and the screen recorder app is now using about 100% on one thread. Okay, so let me go ahead and stop the screen recorder again. And sure enough, we're now back down to 214 watts or so. All right, so anyway, I hope that gives you guys kind of a idea of what the power consumption can be for the HP Z820 with the configuration that I have. And obviously, like I said, this is a very high-end configuration. So if you are concerned about power consumption, I think you can get better numbers than this if you switch over to a lower TDP CPU, maybe less memory modules, that kind of stuff. And of course, if you're going to be adding PCI cards and stuff like that, expect that that's going to consume a little bit more power. But you know, you can figure out what that is and add it to this baseline number. But right now, this machine is idling at about 207 watts, and I think that's actually really great considering the amount of compute power that you have. This machine, as it is configured, would be great for some compute workloads, for sure, because of the E5-2687W V2 processors that can turbo up to 4 gigahertz. And definitely it's a great storage server with the 8 hard drives. And those hard drives really, as we saw earlier, is contributing about 50 watts to the power consumption. And I think that's going to be relatively fixed. You take those 8 hard drives, put them in, you know, any other machine, a more energy efficient machine, and you're going to basically get those same 50-ish watts from those hard drives. So I don't think that part's going to change much. Certainly, yeah, if you run a more energy efficient machine, you're going to, you know, the total consumption is going to be lower. But I think for the amount of compute workload that you can get out of this machine, and with the amount of memory you have in this machine, I actually think 208 watts is not too bad. Now, of course, again, like I said earlier in this video, I think that's really going to highly depend on your local electricity rates. And so you have to decide for yourself if having a server sitting around on all the time, consuming about 200 plus watts, is going to be a problem for you or not. Certainly, there are more energy efficient platforms, but I tend to think that the more energy efficient platforms will not give you as much compute power as this machine can offer. So of course, if you don't need this much compute power, again, you can reconfigure this machine with much lower TDP processors and less memory, which would lower your power consumption. But if you wanted a machine with the equivalent amount of compute power as this, you know, certainly yes, with newer machines you can get more energy efficiency, but I'm not sure that it's going to be, you know, drastically different. And it's certainly with, you know, the latest and greatest hardware, it's certainly going to cost a lot more. So anyway, I think basically my point is I don't think this is too bad. And I live in California where electricity rates are pretty high. So even for me, at least, you know, in my situation, I don't consider this as an extreme energy hog, if you want to put it that way. Certainly there are more energy efficient options out there. But anyway, hope that helps you guys out. If you are running in a Z820 or planning to run a Z820, hopefully the numbers provided today are going to be helpful to you. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. If you like this video, make sure to give me that thumbs up. And if you're new to this channel and you like this sort of stuff, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so you don't miss my next video. Also, if you want to support my channel, go check out my eBay store. I'll leave a link down in the video description. I've got the best selection of pre-flashed IT mode HBA SAS controllers for your ZFS, TrueNAS, or Unraid builds, so go check out the link in the video description. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye.